My father is just a burden now." Those words cut through me like a knife. My daughter's smirk, the laughter of her friends, the sting of their eyes on me. It all pressed down on my chest until I could barely breathe. I sat there in silence, swallowing the weight of her betrayal. But here's what she didn't know. Behind my silence was a strength she had long forgotten, and a decision already sealed in ink, a decision that would change everything when the day of reckoning opens. My dear ones, thank you for sitting with me today. My name is Henry, and I am an old man with more years behind me than ahead, but my voice still carries stories the world should hear. If you're new here, welcome to this little corner where truth, memory, and sometimes betrayal live side by side. And if you've been with me before, you already know this is not just about me. It is about us, about the things we carry and the lessons we leave behind. I want you to feel close to me as I share this story, because it is not just mine. Many of you have lived through moments where the people you loved forgot your worth. Tell me in the comments, has anyone ever dismissed you because of your age? Has anyone ever looked at you and thought your time, your voice, or your presence no longer mattered? Let me tell you, it hurts. It cuts deeper than any wound on the body, but I have learned that silence, when chosen wisely, can be the loudest answer of all. And before this story ends, you'll see how that silence became my strength. So settle in with me, listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you will remind you that respect is earned, and that betrayal, no matter how cruel, can never erase the truth of who you are. From the outside, we must have looked like a picture-perfect family. My daughter, bright and educated, always dressed sharp, speaking with confidence that made others nod in admiration. To her friends, she was the kind of daughter any father would be proud to show off. And for a long time, I truly was proud. Her mother, my late wife, God rest her soul, was the glue that held us together. She had a kindness that softened every edge, even mine. When she passed, I thought my daughter and I would lean on each other. Instead, I began to notice a distance, as though she had built walls too tall for me to climb. There were others in the picture too. My son, quieter than his sister, respectful but often overshadowed by her voice. My grandson, who still runs up to me with open arms, calling me Grandpa Hero. And the neighbor, Mrs. Carter, a widow herself, who would knock on my door just to ask if I needed bread or company. To outsiders, these were just side characters in my life. To me, they became lifelines I didn't realize I would one day depend on. What no one saw was the storm beneath the surface. My daughter's words had grown sharper over the years, her laughter colder, her patience thinner. She was admired in public but dismissive in private. People would say, "You're lucky to have such a devoted daughter." I only smiled, too ashamed to tell them the truth. That devotion had turned into duty, and duty into disdain. When I think back, it's not the cruel words that hurt me most. It's the memories that came before them. There was a time when every coin I earned went into her future. I remember standing in the cold, fixing trucks long after my shift had ended, just so I could pay for her school trip. I remember selling half the land my father left me so she could attend a university she had dreamed about. People told me I was foolish to give up so much, but I believed in her. I believed in the girl who once held my hand and whispered, "Daddy, I'll make you proud." And then there was the house. This old house, with its creaking floors and weathered porch, became more than just walls and wood. It was our shelter in storms, our laughter on Sundays, the place where her mother and I built every dream we had. Every brick I laid, every nail I hammered, was for them. For her. That house was my testament of love. That's why her words cut so deep. To her friends, she called me a burden, yet every inch of her life was built on the sacrifices I made, sacrifices carved into the very bones of that house. She couldn't see it, or maybe she refused to. Still, I held my silence, because deep inside, I knew that house, the very symbol of my life's work, would speak for me when I no longer could. It didn't start with that night in front of her friends. No, the first sting came much earlier, quiet but sharp enough that I still remember it like yesterday. We were at the dinner table. I had told a story, one I'd told before, about the years I worked on the farm with my own father. I laughed at the memory, hoping she'd laugh with me. Instead, she rolled her eyes, set down her fork, and said in a voice laced with irritation, "Dad, Do you have to repeat these old stories every time? You sound like a broken record. Her words landed harder than she knew. My son glanced down at his plate, unwilling to meet my eyes. My grandson kicked his chair gently, sensing the tension without understanding it. And me? I smiled faintly, pretending it didn't matter, pretending it hadn't pierced me right through the chest. Inside, I told myself, she's tired. She doesn't mean it. Don't take it to heart. But my heart didn't listen. It stored those words away, deep in the place where every insult, every dismissal piles up like stones. I sat there quietly, chewing my food slowly, while 1,000 thoughts swirled in my mind. How could she forget the nights I carried her on my shoulders? How could she dismiss the very stories that built the foundation of who we are? I swallowed the pain with my meal, but I didn't forget. I never forgot. Words once spoken have a way of echoing louder than laughter, and even though I let the silence cover it that night, a small part of me knew this was the beginning of something darker. Disrespect has a way of creeping in quietly before it grows bold. After that first sting, the little cuts never stopped. At dinners, she would interrupt me mid-sentence, her voice louder, sharper. "Dad, no one cares about those old days anymore. Times have changed. You wouldn't understand." Laughter from her friends followed, but not the kind that warms a room, the kind that chills it. I'd sit back in my chair, hands folded, and let the silence do the talking. Then came the questions about the house. At first, it was casual. "Dad, have you ever thought about downsizing? Maybe selling this place?" Her tone was light, but her eyes carried calculation. The house, the one I had built nail by nail, brick by brick, suddenly reduced to a property on her checklist. I told her gently, "This house holds memories, child. It's not just wood and stone." She shrugged, muttered under her breath, "Memories don't pay bills." But the deepest cut came the day I trusted her with something small, money to pay a repairman. She promised she'd handle it. Weeks passed. The man showed up at my door, angry, unpaid. My daughter had pocketed the cash. When I confronted her, she smiled faintly, like I was a child confused about the world. "Oh, Dad," it must have slipped my mind. But I saw the truth in her eyes, every moment stacked on top of the other like heavy stones on my back. She thought my silence meant weakness. She thought I was too old to fight back, too tired to care. But inside, I was watching. I was listening. I was remembering. Each insult, each greedy glance, each betrayal, they became chapters in a book she didn't know I was writing. I never raised my voice. I never pushed back. I let her think she was winning. Because sometimes silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is the sound of a storm gathering, waiting for the right time to break. It was around this time that I began to notice shadows where there should have been light. Small things at first, too small for anyone else to see, but clear enough for me. I'd walk into the room and hear the whispers stop, the quick shuffling of papers, the sudden silence. My daughter's voice hushed on the phone, only to rise again once she thought I'd gone back to my chair. One afternoon, I left the house for a walk and came back earlier than expected. Her car was in the driveway. Inside, she was in the study. My study. The drawers to my desk were open, and she had papers in her hands. When she noticed me, she startled, laughed nervously, and said, "Oh, Dad, I was just looking for stamps." But stamps don't make your hands tremble, and they don't make you shove folded papers back into the drawer as if they'd burned you. Then there was the money. Small amounts missing from the box where I kept spare bills for emergencies. It was nothing grand at first, but the pattern was there. A 50 gone here, another there. Each time I asked, she smiled with practiced ease. "Maybe you misplaced it." But I knew my hands, though old, were steady when it came to memory. And the strangest part, I began receiving letters. Not the kind with greetings, but envelopes I never got to open. I'd find them half-torn, tucked into drawers as if someone had meant to hide them. Legal letters, notices, things that seemed out of place in my quiet life. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I tucked these suspicions away, one by one, like puzzle pieces waiting for their place. Something inside me whispered, "Keep watching. Keep listening. The truth is closer than you think." And as much as it pained me to admit it, I was beginning to see that my daughter's betrayal was not just a matter of cruel words. It was something deeper. Something written in ink, hidden in whispers, and buried in papers she never wanted me to see. One evening, while she thought I was asleep, I heard the faint scrape of a drawer. My study again. I didn't move, didn't speak, I simply listened. Her voice carried down the hall, low and sharp on the phone. Once he's gone, the house is mine. Everything will be mine. The words hung in the air like poison. The next morning, I waited until she left. I walked into the study, opened the same drawer she had rummaged through, and there it was. A folded paper, one she had carelessly left behind. It wasn't mine. It was a rough draft of a legal claim, her handwriting scribbled along the edges. She had been planning, already carving up what she thought would soon be hers. I read every line slowly, my old hands trembling not from age, but from the weight of betrayal. She had even listed the house, the very walls that carried her childhood laughter, as property to be claimed. My heart sank, but I felt no need to shout. No need to storm into her room and demand answers. Instead, I slipped the paper back, exactly where I had found it. I made no noise, no accusation, only silence. Because silence can be sharper than anger. And now I had something she never imagined I would, proof. From that moment, I knew. She saw me not as her father, not as her shelter, but as an obstacle standing between her and what she thought she deserved. And I decided then that one day when the truth finally rose, I would let her own words betray her, not mine. So I said nothing. I simply carried it close to my chest, like a secret weapon waiting for the right time. My dear ones, let me pause here for a moment. I want to ask you something. Because this is where the weight of the story truly pressed down on me. If you had walked into that study, if you had read those words, if you had heard your own child plotting behind your back, what would you have done? Would you have confronted them on the spot, demanded the truth, shouted your pain into the room so the walls could carry it back to them? Or would you have stayed silent, kept the proof close, and waited for the right moment to act? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know. I know many of you have been betrayed, some by friends, some by family, and each wound leaves its own scar. Did you fight back in the moment, or did you let time carry your answer? For me, I chose silence, but it was not weakness, it was patience, and patience can be sharper than any blade. The night of the family dinner still burns in my memory. The table was full, plates clattering, voices loud, the smell of roast chicken filling the air. I thought perhaps, just perhaps, this evening would pass without incident. But arrogance always finds a stage. My daughter lifted her glass, smiling that sharp smile that never quite reached her eyes. "You know," she said loudly enough for the whole table to hear, "it's not easy carrying the weight of an old man around. My friends keep asking me why I don't just put Dad somewhere more fitting. After all, he doesn't do much these days but sit and take up space." Laughter trickled from her end of the table, some of it nervous, some of it genuine. I felt every word like a hammer against my chest. She wanted me humiliated. She wanted me small. My son stared at his plate. My grandson clenched his little fists, eyes darting to me for a reaction. And me? I sat still, my fork resting quietly beside my plate. No shake of the hand, no angry words, just silence. Inside, though, I was not broken. I was steady. Her words were fire, but fire burns itself out eventually, and I knew, far better than she realized, that I had already set something in motion she could not control. So I looked at her, my face calm, my eyes fixed, and simply said, "Eat your dinner, child." And in that moment, my silence weighed more than her laughter ever could. It was after that dinner, when the noise had settled and the guests had gone, that I let the first piece of truth slip into the open. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I simply sat in my chair, folded my hands, and said quietly, "Strange thing. The lawyer asked me last week if I wanted to change anything in my will." Her head snapped toward me, her face tightening, though she tried to hide it with a smile. "Your will?" she asked. Her tone a little too sharp, a little too rushed. I nodded, eyes fixed on hers. "Yes," he said, "sometimes it's wise to make adjustments. Life changes, after all." The room went still. She laughed lightly, waved her hand, said, "Oh, Dad, you don't need to worry about things like that. You've already taken care of everything." But her eyes betrayed her. For the first time, I saw fear flicker behind the confidence. She shifted in her chair, tapping her nails against the glass as if the sound could drown out the weight of my words. I said nothing more. I let the silence linger, heavy and deliberate. She thought she knew everything. She thought she held all the cards. But in that moment, she realized there might be a clause she hadn't considered, a letter she hadn't read, a decision already made without her knowing. I left her with that unease, that seed of doubt, because sometimes the smallest crack in a wall is all it takes for the whole thing to collapse. And while she wrestled with the possibility, I remained calm, knowing that the truth she feared most was already waiting in ink, waiting for the day she would sit across from the lawyer and learn that her laughter, her insults, her greed had written her out of everything. The day finally came. I was gone, my chair empty, my voice carried only in memory. And there she sat, in the lawyer's office, polished and confident, her friends whispering about how she was about to inherit everything. She leaned back in her seat as though she already owned the room, as though the walls, the house, even my name, were just another prize she had earned by bloodline alone. The lawyer, an old friend of mine, cleared his throat and began to read. First came the formal words, the legal phrases that sound dry but carry the weight of mountains. She barely listened, twirling her bracelet, already planning how she'd spend what she believed was hers. But then the words shifted. The lawyer's voice slowed, sharpened. To my daughter, who once called me a burden, I leave nothing, for respect cannot be bought and gratitude cannot be forced. The room froze. Her smile slipped, her face pale, her hands gripping the armrests as if the leather itself might hold her together. She stammered. What? That can't be right. He wouldn't do this to me. But the lawyer kept reading, his voice steady as stone. Instead, I leave the house, the land, and the savings to those who carried me with love in my final years, to my grandson who still called me his hero, to my neighbor who checked on me when the world turned its back, and to the charity that feeds the hungry, because kindness must always outlive cruelty. Her friends shifted uncomfortably, their whispers now knives in the silence. She broke, slamming her hand on the table, her voice rising. This isn't fair. He owed me. I'm his blood. But greed is a fragile thing. It builds high walls, but the moment truth strikes, those walls crumble from within. And in that office, with her pride in pieces and her inheritance gone, she finally felt the weight of every word she had thrown at me. I wasn't there to see it, but I didn't need to be. My silence, my patience, and the ink on those papers spoke louder than I ever could. The room fell into a silence so heavy it felt like the air itself had thickened. No one moved. No one spoke. My daughter sat there, trembling, her lips parted as if searching for words that refused to come. The color drained from her face, and the pride that once made her seem taller than the rest of us shrank her smaller than I had ever seen her. The lawyer folded the will gently, set it on the desk, and cleared his throat. His voice was calm, not cruel, steady as if to remind everyone that these were not his words, but mine. Truth, written plain on paper, needed no shouting, no fire, no thunder. It stood on its own like a mountain unmoved by storm. Around her, eyes shifted. Her friends who had once laughed at her cruel jokes now looked away, ashamed. My son stared at the floor, tears in his eyes, not of anger, but of recognition, as though he understood this was justice long delayed but not denied. My grandson held his breath, wide-eyed, not yet old enough to fully grasp what had happened, but wise enough to know that something important had been set right. And in that silence, order returned. Not with raised voices, not with slammed fists, but with the steady weight of truth. She had mocked me, dismissed me, called me a burden before the world, but in the end, her own greed stripped her of everything she thought she was owed. Justice does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And in that quiet office, the whisper of justice was louder than her laughter had ever been. My dear ones, let me leave you with this. Respect is not owed because of blood. It is earned through love and loyalty. You cannot call someone a burden and then expect their blessings to flow into your hands. Patience can feel heavy, but it holds power. I chose silence, not because I was weak, but because truth speaks loudest when it arrives at its own time. And when it did, there was no need for anger, no need for revenge, only the quiet strength of justice fulfilled. Remember this. Treat those who raised you with dignity, for they carried you when you could not walk. And when the world grows cold, it is not money or inheritance that warms you. It is respect, loyalty, and truth. My dear ones, thank you for sitting with me through this story. I know it was not easy to hear, and it was not easy to live through, but your company makes the weight lighter on my heart. Every time you listen, every time you share a thought in the comments, it feels as though I am no longer speaking into silence, but sitting among friends who understand. Now, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what do you think matters more? Inheritance or respect? Have you ever been treated as though your worth was less, simply because of age, or because someone thought they had already outgrown you? I read your words, and they remind me that these stories belong not only to me, but to all of us. If this story touched you, I ask you to subscribe, to share it with someone who might need the reminder that dignity is stronger than greed, and to stay with me here on this channel, where we tell the truths that families often try to bury. Each story holds a lesson, and each lesson brings us closer to the strength we sometimes forget we have. And before I go, let me leave you with this blessing. From my heart to yours, stay strong, stay wise, stay blessed.